You may all be seated. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sibulele Sipata Nomganga, and I'm the Her Voice Fund country lead for South Africa. Tonight, I'm going to be your moderator as we talk through the conversation, Resource Mobilization for Health, a must to attain gender equality. Just for a few housekeeping rules, may we all please switch our cell phones onto silent at this stage. And then when we do get to the question and answer session, I would really encourage each and every one of us to engage and participate. That is why we are here. The UN SDG goal number 5 is to achieve gender equality and empower women and girls and gender diverse communities. Evidence, however, shows us that women and girls' access to economic opportunities, reproductive health services, and social resources are decreasing. This is because of the challenges that they are currently facing, such as climate change, armed conflicts, as well as the most recent COVID-19 pandemic. The reality is that we are only 7 years away from our goal 2030. And while we have done so many great things, and there's a lot to celebrate, we still have a very long way to go. The time to accelerate progress starts now. And to accelerate us into the program tonight, please help me to welcome the First Lady, Her Excellency, as well as the Chairperson of Imbuto Foundation, Mrs. Jeanette Kagame.
Amazing energy in this room. Honorable Speaker of the lower chamber of Parliament, Your Excellencies, Honorable Chief Minister of Jersey, Christina Moore, honorable dignitaries present, senior representatives from the United Nations and our co-hosts, the Global Fund, Her Voice and Rwanda NGOs Forum on HIV and AIDS and Health Promotion, financial leaders, allies, and advocates of gender equality, distinguished guests, all protocols observed, good evening. Thank you for having me here and for creating spaces of engagement between those committed to gender equality from all walks of life, from diverse institutions and from different origins. Firstly, I wish to raise a few questions. What's the financial value of a woman's health? The truth is, gender equality is invaluable. But what, on the other hand, is the real cost to the world of societies failing to address the need for women's empowerment? The World Bank estimates the loss in human capital wealth due to gender inequality to be at least $160.2 trillion, or twice the global GDP. Yet we know deep in our cores, based on our respective expertise or exposure, that it would take much, much less to develop self-reliant systems for female empowerment and achieve gender equality at last. So why spare any available necessary resource in this quest? Ladies and gentlemen, the Global Fund has been a strong, valued partner to Rwanda and to non-profit organizations such as mine, Imbuto Foundation, which I chair. Rwanda has secured commendable progress in the health status of our communities, significantly shrinking its rates of HIV infection. Mother-to-child infection, transmission have been almost non-existent for the past few years. To all those that thought or fought to get us here, we thank you. Dear guests, for all our advancements, as is the case around the world, our journey to equality is taking longer than expected, and I think longer than necessary. The gender gap, our opponent in this fight, is way, way ahead. That it should take well over a century to earn women the parity to which they are entitled in the world, with growing resources and developmental tools such as technology, increasing knowledge and expertise, and I believe a rising commitment to social justice is unacceptable. By the time these years have passed, several generations of women will have been repressed, overlooked, exploited, or even abused by a world that failed to prioritize their empowerment early and decisively enough. What will it take to stop this socioeconomic lapse in its tracks? We hold more power in our hands to speed up the necessary change than I believe we necessarily recognize or realize. And indeed, power is most deserved when it facilitates the empowerment of those that must be served. Only then does a leader prove themselves worthy of the authority they are given by those that entrusted them to lead. In this room are leaders in their respective fields. In this room are people with the reach to steer considerable funds towards this good fight. So I pray that in this room there is the unwavering will to put our hearts and yes, our funds where the needs of our populations of women and girls reside. Esteemed guests, as I close my remarks, allow me to share my position on aid, resource mobilization, and nonprofit partnerships. I understand how, particularly in times of costly crisis recovery, there can be a general fatigue regarding the funding of charitable or even developmental endeavors. Some may even wonder if, for all their good intentions, funding is actually helping in the long run. But the truth is, unless past efforts are to go to waste, current efforts must be maintained. I can assure you that those receiving support bear sentiments that align with yours. And I can assure you that they too dream of a world of self-reliance for all our communities, a world in which the systems that empower and protect them can sustain and strengthen themselves. This is where investments are going, towards the building of a socioeconomic conditions for self-empowerment, autonomy, and most importantly, dignity for all. I believe that there are few worthier causes. I thank you for your presence, time, and attention.
Thank you very much to Her Excellency for those words that you have given us. What I take away from what you said today is we indeed hold the power in our hands to make the difference. And we need the leaders in this room to put their hearts and funds in the right place for us to make considerable change. And while our technical team is making sure that our stage is ready for the next section of our program, I'd like to introduce you to some of our panelists. We have Honorable Dr. Sabin Nsanzimana, who is the Minister of Health in the Republic of Rwanda. The doctor has previously served as the Director General of the University Teaching Hospital of Butare. Prior to that, he led the Rwanda Biomedical Center from 2019 to 2022, after serving 10 years as Director of National HIV and Hepatitis Programs. He holds extensive experience in infectious diseases, non-communicable diseases, program design, strategic planning, and implementation science. We also have Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, who is the former Executive Director at UN Women. Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka is the former United Nations Under Secretary General and Executive Director of the UN. She was awarded a doctorate in technology and education from Warwick University. She has authored several scholarly and other opinion pieces. A Hausa leader at the Harvard Kennedy School's of Center for Public Leadership. She engaged in international work at a young age, campaigning for girls and young women around the world with YWCA, where she was head of young women. also have Christine Stegling, who is the Deputy Executive Director, Policy Advocacy and Knowledge Branch, UNAIDS. Christine is the Deputy Executive Director of Policy Advocacy and Knowledge Branch at the Joint United Nations Program on HIV and AIDS, and an Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations. Prior to joining UNAIDS in January 2023, Ms. Stegling was the Executive Director of Frontline AIDS. Previously, she was Executive Director of both the International Treatment Preparedness Coalition and the Botswana Network on Ethics, Law, and HIV. Ms. Angela Muriti, Director of East and Southern Africa Plan International. Angela is the Regional Director for East and Southern Africa with Plan International and former Country Director with Plan International in Zimbabwe. Angela is accountable for all Plan International country offices in the ESSA region and implementation of Plan International's 5-year strategy. All girls standing strong. Angela retains strong linkages to the Global Fund and has led Plan Zimbabwe's work in HIV and malaria projects. Millicent Sitaile, who's the Her Voice Fund Ambassador in Botswana. Millicent Sitaile is an award-winning community development practitioner who is passionate about health and wellness, of adolescents and young people, and a bold activist. She has extensive background in finance with a degree in finance, SRHR programming, and advocacy for universal health care nationally, in Botswana and globally. Currently consulting for the international development agencies such as the Global Fund, UNFPA, World Health Organization, and GIZ. Katifal So, who's the head of Africa and Middle East in the Global Fund. Katifal So is the head of the Africa and Middle East Department of Grant Management Division at the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria since December 2022. She is responsible for managing a portfolio of grants in 48 countries, totaling $4.1 billion for the period 2020 to 2022, including COVID-19 financing. This includes mobilizing leadership support in the countries receiving funding, ensuring partnership is functional across the implementation ecosystem, and enhancing global and regional collaboration with stakeholders involved in the fight against the 3 diseases and health system strengthening. I am now going to call on my panelists to come on stage as I call out their names. May I please have Dr. Saba Nsanzimana come to the stage? May I have Millicent Sitaile come to the stage? Can I have Christine Stegling come to the stage? Can I have Katifal So please come to the stage? Can they be joined by Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka? And lastly, may I have Angela Muriti? Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to go right into the question for you, Minister of Health here in Rwanda. Dr. Saba, positive impact of investment in health for women and girls in Rwanda. And we all know that that is what is needed to accelerate the change that we want to see. What does that look like for you? Yes.
Great. Thank you, Your Excellency, First Lady, distinguished participants, panelists. Thank you so much for having me and my colleagues on this panel. After this speech from Excellency First Lady, I want just to highlight a few things from this question. It starts from the whole topic of this conversation on how do we invest in the right way, with the right time, but also how do we measure the outcomes of what we really invest in, and focusing on those that are most in need, because it's not about the amount of money that you put in, is actually where you put in and how you're coordinated and organized. And I think if you have to invest in the right place, investing in women and girls is probably the best way to see the return on investment, because it's all about investing in communities, in families, and families are the backbone of any country growth and economy. So we've seen in many years looking back, let's say for the case of Rwanda, 29 years back, a lot of transformations, where after the country was actually torn apart from the tragic history of Rwanda and genocide against the Tutsis that affected more actually women and young girls and other vulnerable communities. But later on, the government of Rwanda choosing to rebuild a nation, and also how the partnerships that were created all around. And I'm glad to have my colleagues from Global Fund on this panel, because this is one of the partners that really came in very early to support in the 3 diseases control that were also affecting women and girls disproportionately compared to other communities. So all in all, it's not about men or women. It's actually supporting or helping those that are most vulnerable, those that are most in need, especially in conflict or post-conflict situations, or by any ways that communities or by regions or by any other society differences we see or are affected by different diseases. So you mentioned about how do we see that, or how do we move it forward more quickly. I think to me it's all about the health system strengthening, and any investment we put into this health system in general. For example, if you build a health facility, you buy an ambulance that is going to take a mom or anyone to the hospital. It's not you're not directly targeting a specific individual or a group of individuals, but it helps everyone equally. And the outcome it's actually amazing if you look at the little investment put into these programs in the last 2 decades, almost 3 decades. Her Excellency mentioned the mother-to-child transmission as an example. We are seeing that in other programs like malaria, cervical cancer. Now you're thinking of elimination. Talking about diseases that were seen as a sentence of death, HIV in general, or hepatitis that has been also highlighted. And how do we make sure that we don't go back from those gains, even if we are stressed by a pandemic like COVID-19 or something else that can come tomorrow, is by having very, very strong health systems and making sure that we don't see that if we invest in low middle income countries, it's actually a donation to specific countries. It's an investment for all of us, and it's an investment for all communities. So we're seeing that, and the progress is there. Unfortunately, is slow. It's not enough. As we come together on this panel and this conference, Women Deliver, how do we deliver more and faster, and looking at where the most need are, not necessarily to those who have who can pay back, because there's no one going to pay if it's for all of us. It's an investment for all of us, and the voices of our communities must be heard. Yeah. Our health system must be adapted to everyone else, and especially those who are most at risk to be affected by any change. And in general, we need also to have data systems to know how it comes, how it happens. That is also very important. The voices must be heard, especially those who are likely not to be heard. That's reaching the last miles. So it's a combination of all those things. This is how I see that. And I'm glad that other experts on the panel may actually have specific answers or contribution to what it means exactly to accelerate these gains, and how do we get resources. And to conclude to this question, actually, there's a say we had today that actually there are resources somewhere. It's a matter of getting to those resources. And if you don't get there and use them right, they can be misused, and you lose the resources and you lose the gains.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. What I'm taking away from you is accelerated progress is what we need, right? But for us to not lose on the gain that we've already made, stronger health systems are going to be key. And that's going to require all of us in the room to do that. Thank you so much. Moving on to my girl and colleague, Millicent, who is the Her Voice Fund Ambassador from Botswana. How can we empower adolescent girls and young women to become effective leaders in health? And you work with girls and young women every single day. What impact does this have on the community?
Thank you so much, Sibu, and good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you. Sibu, as much as we say leaders are born, it is important to also highlight that leaders are built. And leadership is a journey of investment. And for us to, in order to actually have leaders who can contribute meaningfully to their communities and benefit their communities, we need to invest. Invest in education and skills development. We need to keep girls and adolescent girls in safe schools. In schools, but not only schools, but in safe schools. Because if you were part of the opening session from yesterday, Afghanistan is going through so much, and adolescent girls and young women don't have access to schools and access to education. It is also important to build the skills of adolescent girls and young women, skills of leadership, in order for them to actually sit and participate meaningfully in platforms. For example, myself, I am here with great people, great leaders, because someone has actually invested in building my skills to participate and contribute meaningfully. This is an investment that, as we talk of meaningful engagement and ensuring that adolescent girls and young women have space and know the issues and can articulate the issues, we need to invest in building their skills. We can't go anywhere without education development. Another important thing is, as a community, or an investment that we can make into communities is mentorship. It is important that adolescent girls and young women, like myself again, are mentored. And you leaders, by encouraging us to participate in these leadership platforms, encouraging us, holding our hands, in encouraging us to participate meaningfully in leadership platforms. Politics is one area in which adolescent girls and young women are not encouraged, or there's limited leadership positions for adolescent girls and young women to actually see that we can contribute in. And this is a platform in which young people can actually take leadership. And lastly, Sibu, in terms of what we need to invest in, is collaborative approach to community development. We need everyone, and all 1.8 billion of us young people need collaborative approaches in how we're investing into our communities. We need to see ways in which stakeholders are coming together, and we are advocating actually for stakeholders to come together, because adolescent girls and young women just don't belong to civil society organizations. They belong to communities, and communities that everybody in this room actually comes from. Sibu, I work with young people and adolescent girls and young women in Botswana and in the region, and we have seen that investment, and these kind of investment can actually have a positive effect in our communities. We have seen that if we educate and empower adolescent girls and young women, they are empowered, but most importantly, they feel equal, and they have opportunities for them to contribute meaningfully to the issues that they are faced with in their communities. I work with different community girls in refugee camps, and the biggest challenge all the time is that we don't have linkages to opportunities. You come here, you empower me, you educate me, but you don't link me to anything. You don't link me to services, SRHR services. I don't know where to access services, or the services that I need to access are actually not available. So you're empowering me and educating me, and then what? Where do I take those skills? So we need to also ensure that we're investing in linking young people to opportunities and empowering them, that as they're empowered, they can actually contribute to these issues. And lastly, in conclusion, Sibu, it is great that we have delegates from across the globe in the conference. As we want to take up space, it's important to articulate that SRHR and gender equality cannot be a political issue, because in reality it is a human right issue. So we're young people, and this is our right. It is our right to access these services. It is our right for us to have information, education, and then be linked to access these services. Thank you.
Thank you, Millicent. You are a really great example of what it means to invest in girls and young women. We see you, we hear you, and we know that it's possible because of you.
Very much.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Moving on to Ms. Christine Stegling, my question to you is, what proactive measures and innovative approaches is UNAIDS currently implementing to ensure adequate investments in health programs that promote gender equality?
Thank you, Sibu. And thank you, fellow panelists. I'm really happy to be here. We agreed all protocol was observed through the minister,
Yes.
but I did want to just acknowledge Your Excellency, Madame Kagame's really amazing leadership over so many years for gender equality and for HIV. And I wouldn't have done it justice if I didn't say that before I spoke. So thank you. So to your question, I think a few things to say. I think as UNAIDS, and having invested over 25 years now into the HIV response, we know very well that we need to, the investments need to be multifaceted, and they need to be across different actors, and they need to be the best return on investment, not for the money, but for the people that we invest in. It's important, I think, and I often feel like we don't talk about it enough, and I'm really happy that Women Delivers in Africa this time, because we can't talk about women and young women without talking about HIV on the continent. We just released our report last week, and every week in 2022, 4,000 adolescent girls and young women got infected on the continent, and 3,200 of those were in Africa. So we still have a pandemic on our hands and on the continent, and we do need to be smart and collaborative as we invest. We cannot change the trajectory of those trends unless we also fix the chronic underinvestment in programs that are really designed to address the structural causes and consequences of gender-based violence, and Millicent has spoken to that, and gender equalities. I want to remind you, when we talk on investment, I have some interesting figures here from feminist researchers that have pointed out that 99% of development aid and foundation grants do not directly go to women's rights and feminist organizations. Despite new funding commitments being made all the time on gender equality and women's rights, only 0.1% of the total official development assistance and only 0.4% of all gender-related aid go to women's rights organizations. And that should give us time to pause and think whether our investments are going in the right places. In response, and the work that we do at UNAIDS is working very closely with the Global Fund at country, mainly at country and at regional level, to ensure that the investments that we have from the Global Fund are informed by very in-depth gender assessments in countries, and through technical support that really looks at what is it that we're responding to at country level, and what are the gender dynamics and the gender transformative programs that we need to fund also as part of HIV, TB, and malaria grants. we also created an initiative, and I spoke about it earlier today, which seems to have had some pushback from people. We realized at UNAIDS that, you know, getting people and keeping girls in education, as you just said, Millicent, is an enormous benefit for prevention, for HIV prevention. We know that girls that go to the final end of their secondary education are 50% less likely to get infected with HIV. So investment in education is good for all sorts of reasons, but it's a real prevention tool that we should all be using. So UNAIDS, together with other UN agencies, with UNFPA, with UNICEF, with UNESCO and UN Women, created a program called Education Plus, or an initiative, which is spearheaded by the African Union and is supported by 15 heads of states in Africa, which is exactly trying to do this, to put money into secondary education for everybody, to create violence-free schools, to create an environment for CSE, and through that, not only invests in the economic gains of having people being educated, but also the health gains. So that's one of the things we're doing. I also want to speak a little bit about what the minister said. It's really important, as we are investing into health systems, that we invest in community systems and community health systems. And I think when we look in Rwanda, it's one of those places where we can see what the benefit is when a health system is tightly linked up with community systems. So as UNAIDS, we have what we call the 30-16-80 targets, which are really, and they're in our global strategy, which is signed off by member states, where we will be held accountable at some point that a good amount of money goes into community organizations and community actors themselves, because we know that is where we will reach gender equality, that's where we reach better health for everybody. I think I might leave it at that. I think one of the other things that might be interesting to think about is that, you know, when we talk about financing and how we hold each other accountable for financing, we need to think about accountability mechanisms that are broader than what we have currently. And, you know, UNAIDS is by no means, the joint program on AIDS is by no means perfect, but it is a joint program of 11 UN agencies, and we are the only UN agency that has civil society and affected populations and key populations on our board. And I think that's one of the things that we should think about. How do we replicate that elsewhere? This is accountability where young people, most affected people, most at-risk people can hold us accountable and say, are you actually investing and doing the things that you say you should be doing?
Great, thank you so much. We are learning that community and healthcare systems go hand in hand. We can't afford to relax. We still have a pandemic on our hands. We're gonna have to be creative and smart if we are truly to win. Thank you so much for that. Moving on to our next panelist, Ms. Katie Falso. What is the given the current economic landscape, how can we ensure more sustainable investment in comprehensive health programs, building on the outcomes of the recent Global Fund 7th replenishment?
Thank you, Sibu. And let me do a little bit of a roundabout before I get to your questions. I just wanted to start by saying that I'm really honored and delighted to be in Kigali and on this panel of remarkable champions, and also women champions, but also champion of women, because we have Minister Saba with us. I discovered this amazing country 14 years ago, and I was the fund portfolio manager, managing the Global Fund grants and assigned to Rwanda. And I came here from Senegal, not knowing the country, only having read books and seen documentaries. And Rwanda, you made the Global Fund look good. You made our country team look good. Though you also gave us a little bit of white hair, because you are continuously on the path of innovation and running to achieve results. And we basically had also to be running after you to cope with the journey. And that was amazing. For me, I think that the country that has actually afforded me the competencies that I have, one of them is Rwanda.
Wow.
You pioneered health reforms and innovations. You pioneered gender equality. And I've seen so many examples of that, live examples of that. Political leadership, economic empowerment, comprehensive health service delivery, taking into account the needs of women and girls, hearing them, listening to them, and programming for them. I think that is an amazing achievement. And wherever I go and I talk about Rwanda, people tell me, oh, Katie, you're so biased. And I answer, I am so happy to be biased. Her Excellency, Mrs. Janet Kagame, many thanks for having us. Murakoze channel. So Sibu, coming back to your question, you already acknowledged the global context, climate change, post-COVID consequences, the conflicts around the world. And these are really serious risks that are putting us off track to achieve the SDGs and hence gender equality. They have hampered also global macroeconomic outlooks and country macroeconomic prospects. And what we're seeing is essentially our leaders prioritizing and reprioritizing expenditures, public expenditures, across sectors, but also to service debt. Limiting the resources that are available for programs, available for social and human development, and hence for health and education. And we know that these are key pillars when we talk about gender equality. So while the risk of not financing adequately comprehensive health programs with a focus on gender equality has not yet materialized, it has heightened. And we have to be on the lookout so that the gains that we have achieved are not reversed. Last September in New York, at its 7th replenishment, the Global Fund secured $15.7 billion. Donor commitments. But I want to say my gratitude to the women, girls, but also to the boys and men, because they are our champions, to affected communities who made it happen. It is your narrative that actually spoke to donors. It's not because we sat there. It is your narrative and your results. And part of these funds are targeted to health programs for women and girls. And I take the statistic you just shared. We'll have to work better to actually target directly women's organizations. And today more than ever, our partnership and the global ecosystem must do more, much more. And Minister Sama, you said it. It's about really investing in the right places and investing much more smartly, because our envelopes have actually reduced. And it is the only way to address the needs of women and girls, and also gender equality. So sustainability for us is about co-financing from governments and donors, including the private sector, including philanthropists, but also maybe starting to look out for non-traditional donors. We tend to always go to the same people, but we have actually actors that are extremely resourceful. And I'm discovering many of them here at Women Deliver. The last 2 days have actually been a testament to it. And let's actually cross those bridges and establish the interconnections amongst us. It's not because you're not in health that you cannot be about gender equality. And it's not because you're in agriculture that you cannot be about gender equality. Sustainable financing is also about reducing fragmentation. And I think that we are also guilty of that. We are guilty of wanting to run our organization's mandates, guilty of wanting to run to actually meet our objectives. And in doing that, we actually fragment a response that should be one. So focusing on Women Deliver 2023 slogan, what I want to say about spaces, and I'll just talk quickly about spaces, slogans, and solutions. And what I want to say about spaces is that we know where sustainable investments are being discussed. We know where the conversations lead to decisions. It's the boardrooms, it's the cabinet meetings, it's the health coordination platforms and the multi-sector platforms, also the community dialogue spaces. But I think they have to be leveraged by all. They have to be known by all and leveraged by all. So if you're not invited at the table, tell us. And if you're not invited at the table, set your table, create it, and demand that we join your table. That's really a call for you as an organization, but also as an African sister. On solidarity, what I can say is that We are at a place where Global Fund actually has been the organization that it is because of solidarity. We live it and we breathe it. When we go to replenishment, everything we share with donors is about solidarity. And that's how actually we also attract funding. So as much as, you know, the conversations sometimes are uncomfortable, I want you, because we want our solidarity mandate to progress further so that this train that we are on, that Her Excellency has mentioned to be slow, and we need to go faster, we need to accelerate. Please challenge us so that we address the drivers of the epidemic that are rooted in inequalities. We know about harmful gender norms. We know about the power dynamics between men and women. We live them daily, and we overcome them. But we want also our sisters, our daughters, to actually be afforded the ability to make their decisions to access health services without having to jump across the inequities and the inequalities. And on solutions, they exist. Again, we know them. And I think the last 2 days of conversations are a testament to it, but the last decades of conversations are a testament to it. Some have been piloted, some have been scaled up, and I think that we still have to think through making them available to everyone, every woman in all countries, in all continents. This is where we talk about scalability and we talk about sustainability. As a Global Fund, we recommit to promoting and protecting human rights and gender, and that actually is a pillar of our 2023-2028 strategy. We want to see funding requests and grants that are intentionally transformative for the health of women and girls, that engage the target beneficiaries. And I will spare you an image that I heard about this morning, but in essence what it says is nothing for you without you. We always talk about the woman in her absence. We diagnose her in her absence, and we prescribe drugs in her absence. That is unacceptable. She has to be at the table actually to drive that conversation. We will continue opening the circles with humility, and we call on you to also open them and to challenge us when we are actually failing you, so that the investments that we mobilize are truly making a meaningful difference. And change is difficult. His Excellency President Kagame said it yesterday. It's true. Change is difficult, but we will keep at it. And Millicent, Maximina, I don't know whether you are in the room.
She is.
We want to find you at our tables.
Yes.
We want to find you where funding is discussed. We want to find you where strategies are being designed. We want to find you where decisions are being made. Please continue being actually the voice of all girls, yes, young girls, but also women, because you are actually an inspiration for us to act. The Global Fund will play its roles, and it is our commitment. Her Excellency, you used the word that really spoke to me. If we don't act, it is not only unacceptable, but the opportunity cost that we are going to bear will be irresponsible. Ubuntu.
Thank you very much for that. And as a young woman leader myself, I'm learning that if I want to grow and accelerate in my area of work, I need to come to Rwanda. I'm going to make that happen, check. Absolutely. But most importantly, we will challenge you. We will challenge you. And where you're not inviting us to the table, we'll create our own and drag you to the table. And we are hoping that you'll happily come along. And what I would like to just wrap up what you said for me is, as young people say, #smart investing. Thank you so much. Dr. Mamu Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, the question that I have for you is, how can access to good health services contribute to the economic empowerment of women? And what difference would that make?
Thank you very much. Like the other members of this panel, I also want to start by thanking our First Lady, because I've also benefited from Rwanda, who has been a partner in gender equality as I worked at the UN. And now that I'm chairing the board of Women Deliver, that partnership continues. So thank you so much for that support, Madam. You know, women are very good with their health. In a family, it is the woman, the mom, who looks after everyone's health, her own, the health of her children, older people, and anyone who needs support at home. Just not getting through to the guys. But that's another story for another time. It's much more difficult to get the guys to be focused on their health. And the doctors may correct me, that the reason why we lost so many men during COVID had a lot to do with the fact that, as we would say in South Africa, they just did not always see the need to pay attention to their health needs. And this is one of the challenges of gender inequality, empowering men to know that it's not weak to look for help and to look after your health. But the majority of women are poor. So where there are user fees, where women need help, it is much more difficult for women to have all the health care that they need if they have to pay for it. So I would say one of the ways in which we can assist women is making sure that as much as possible we take away user fees, especially for the essential health needs that women have, that we strengthen primary health care so that women can also prevent some of the complications that come with negligence or inability to access health services. When we, for instance, think about policies that exist in most of our countries that creates an environment where our health becomes worse rather than better. That is the governments wasting their own money by enabling their people to eat wrong. The fact that it's easy to walk into a shop and see lines of drinks you shouldn't be having. And you are able to access drinks with a lot of sugar that you shouldn't be having. There should be a way of regulating this and pressurizing those who produce and sell those drinks and make profit out of making us unhealthy to actually limit whatever they add. I don't want to mention the drink, but you all know what you drink, which is not healthy for you. Salt. I mean, these are the basic things that women use every day. I think many of us, how many of us here have got high blood pressure? Okay, you're a very healthy group. But honestly, the way we buy foods that already have more salt than we need, again, this is something that governments can do something about and help us. So I would say, rather than finding money that you give to women, it's about creating a situation where the lifestyle that women have access to makes them healthy. But let me just touch on gender-based violence, which is one of the biggest difficulties we have in the world, in almost every country in the world. If we consider the cost of violence against women, when women have to live with violence, they miss time to go to work, and that impacts on productivity, and that affects the economy. They have to go and find health services, and where they have to pay, that is money being paid, or even if the health services are subsidized, that is the money that the government could be using somewhere else, but the government has to take care of this woman. And of course, the fact that perpetrators never have to contribute towards the welfare and the healing of this person they have injured. I found it very interesting at UN Women in the work that we did with the WHO, that in our research, we were able to find and learn more about violence against women from WHO, because most of the women who live with violence will tell their doctor or a medical practitioner, because it will be the orthopedic surgeon because something is broken. It will be the eye specialist because something has happened. It will be someone who is in emergency service because she's brought in as an emergency. It will be someone for mental health because she has depression. So all of these things brought together affect the capacity for women to be economically active. I think it's very important that we don't make this a responsibility for women, because women are not beating themselves up. Women are being beaten, and we therefore have to challenge the culprits. We have to challenge the perpetrators. We have to address the language that we use. We shouldn't be saying that so many women are raped. We should say so many men rape, so that the blame is where it is. So even as we look at this question of what has to happen to the economy, what do men have to do so that women are healthy and there isn't an economic issue? Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much for your comments there. And I think what I'm taking away is that while investing financially in women's health, it's equally important that as women, we have the responsibility to manage our lifestyles, and that we meet each other halfway, and that where we can't, our government forces those sugar taxes so that we do the right thing, because all of this really decreases the economic participation of women, which we know have a negative impact, not only in families, but in communities. Thank you so much for that. And our last panelist for the evening, Ms. Angela Muriti. What role can the private sector play in advancing gender equality in general and in health equity in particular?
Thank you, Sibu. Let me first start by saying thank you to the young woman whose image represented me on the screen. That was not my picture, but I'm very honored because she's much more beautiful than me, and therefore, actually, thank you to the conveners of this session for using her image. I'm so happy to be here today as part of this distinguished panel, and especially, a special mention to our youth ambassador and the young people in the room. If you've been attending Women Deliver sessions with young people, I'm sure you'll agree with me that adolescent girls and young women are going to take over the world one day. And actually, I go into sessions and I'm just mum because I am at a loss for words. So thank you very much that you are here, and so glad to hear from you. Your Excellencies, honorable colleagues, Global Fund and other partners, on behalf of Plan International Delegation to Women Deliver 2023, I would like to thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in this event. I have the rather daunting but also exciting task of representing the private sector, of which the INGO sector belongs to, and the civil society. And I would like to start by telling you a story of a young woman called Tanya Radzwa. She's Zimbabwean, and she comes from Kwekwe. And you can close your eyes if you want to, just don't fall asleep while I'm telling you this story. But I want you to imagine Tanya Radzwa. She's 20 years old. She's a young woman in Zimbabwe, and she recently began her university studies to become an accountant. While in secondary school, she walked 7 kilometers to and from school, sometimes in very unsafe circumstances. She's from an area called Kwekwe, where there is artisanal mining. So you can imagine the environment, lots of men around engaged in the business of mining. So she faced an increased risk of sexual harassment, abuse, sexual violence, early and forced marriage, teenage pregnancy, and HIV and AIDS. But she's committed to continuing her education. And through her participation in a Plan International Global Fund financed program, which was focusing on HIV prevention, she received a package of peer-led girls' social and economic empowerment activities. And she benefited from gender-responsive and adolescent-friendly sexual reproductive health awareness-raising sessions. Most importantly, Tanya Radzwa was supported to graduate from secondary school and be accepted into university. And she now acts as a mentor for young girls in secondary school as part of a sister-to-sister peer approach. So I'm so happy and proud to tell you that story, because actually I'm touching on all the points that the previous speakers have mentioned, isn't it? I was just ticking the boxes while I was listening to you. The story of Tanya Radzwa's life can't be contained in just this short paragraph, but it's a strong example of how intersections of HIV, GBV prevention, access to and retention in education. I was so glad to hear the contribution from my colleague from UNAIDS. Economic empowerment opportunities, health equity programming can contribute powerfully to gender equality and inclusion, all those things together. Now you tell me one organization that does all that. Does it exist? It's very hard to find one organization or one body that does all those things. So you can tell where I'm going to with my points. As a feminist myself from a very young age and believing in these foundational pillars of gender equality, I share this story with you today to show you all the impact that mobilizing resources in support of health and education for gender equality has had for young women like Tanya Radzwa all around the world. The gender transformative approach of this grant allows adolescent girls and young women like Tanya to understand their human rights to health, education, to strengthen their agency over their bodies, their bodily integrity, to strengthen their ability to make informed choices for their health and deciding for themselves how they want to live their lives. Yesterday, no, actually not yesterday, today at lunchtime I was in a briefing with youth advocates, and I can tell you they know what they want for their health. These young women know exactly what they want. It's up to us to respond to them. So INGOs and the private sector, I know you are wondering where the private sector is coming in. INGOs and the private sector as a whole play an important role in terms of resource mobilization and influencing in support of gender equality and inclusion and health equity. Through investment, partnerships, promoting innovation, CSR programs, technology, job creation, advocacy, local engagement, capacity building, and scalability. All those points have been mentioned by previous speakers today. The private sector contributes to improving healthcare access and promoting gender equality on the continent. Effective collaboration between the private sector, governments, and other stakeholders is essential for sustainable and impactful resource mobilization. We saw this example during the Global Fund's 7th Replenishment Conference in September 2022. And I don't know whether you've looked at the Imbuto booklet here. If you go to the back page, you will see a picture that shows the partnerships that are involved in the work that the foundation does. And actually, when I looked at it, I thought maybe Your Excellency, the First Lady, would have been in a better position to answer the question than myself, because she's already doing it. But I thought, that's a really good example of private sector engagement to achieve our goals. So in truth, these partnerships are not always easy. Like brothers and sisters in a family, we squabble sometimes, isn't it? We have fights. There are often tensions between values and profits, processes and efficiencies, rigor and speed. I think while I'm mentioning these categories, you know where you stand, isn't it? You can tell where you're standing. Short-term wins versus longer-term sustainability. Nonetheless, we work together, and our differences and our diversity are the source of learning. We teach each other a lot, and our strength comes from the diversity of our partnerships. At Plan, we embrace a partnerships approach, recognizing that we cannot achieve sustainable development outcomes by working alone, and we must build relationships, raise resources, and work together with a variety of partners, donors, the UN family, governments, corporations, all those who have an impact on the changes we are seeking. And a multiplier effect of this kind of collaboration can be seen in other of our projects. For example, Plan International was able to partner with the telco, Airtel Malawi, and other digital marketing companies for our Global Fund HIV grant in the country, to train and support adolescent girls and young women to set up mobile money accounts and small business enterprises. And these girls and young women were able to expand how they source products to sell, access markets beyond their own neighborhoods, and all this safely because they don't need to carry large amounts of cash. Carrying large amounts of cash was causing them to be at risk for attacks and gender-based violence. So Tanya Radzwa's story is not yet finished. We recently learned that she faces more challenges in her goal to seek higher education. And while she has begun her university education, she has had to pause her studies due to lack of funds. And sadly, this is a reality for many girls from low-income families who complete secondary school in East and Southern Africa. We are actively supporting her to find ways to access alternative sources of funding to complete her education. As I mentioned before, we cannot do this alone. We are all part of a value system that compels us to ensure that the dreams of young women like Tanya come to fruition. We are part of a value system. We used to say value chain, now we say value system, isn't it? We finish and somebody else picks up. We must all work together to make sure that Tanya's dreams come to fruition. And this requires we all work together in partnership. For now, we are very proud of the fact that this collaborative work yielded important results for Tanya. She was able to graduate secondary school, learn key lessons about her human rights, prevent HIV and teen pregnancies, and instill a drive for learning and continued growth. And I bet you anything she's gonna make it. We're gonna find the resources, she's gonna finish her university, and she'll be a fully qualified accountant ready to make her contribution to her community. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, the imperative remains strong for us, whatever sector we belong to collaborate, to mobilize resources for targeted investments in health, which produce sustainable gender equality and inclusion outcomes. Tanya Radzwa's story only re-emphasizes this. There was no way we could have done it alone. While this goal is challenging in today's world where economic and humanitarian challenges abound, there are so many demands on funds, we will not be backing away from this goal, and we look forward to working with you all. Thank you so much. Murakoze, thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And apologies for using the wrong picture. I must just put that out there.
No, it's fine. You're forgiven.
Thank you very much. And thank you for reminding us of Tanya Radzwa's story and really showing what true investment means. And very seldomly do we as girls and young women and leaders, you know, when we are empowered, don't turn around and empower others, even though our lives are not together. We do this because we love it and we know that it makes a real difference. Because of time, I'm only going to allow 2 questions. And while we figure out who those 2 people are going to ask a question, I'm going to allow Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, and I'm going to please ask that we excuse her as she is rushing off to another engagement. May we please give her a round of applause as she leaves. I've noted a question there at the back. Yes, 1 and 2. Thank you so much. Can we grab the mic and get the mic to them, please? Thank you. You already have one. May you please ask your question. So I'm going to allow the questions to be asked, and then what I'm going to do is going to allow the panelists that you direct the question to answer the question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Am I audible?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much. My name is Steve Letsike. I'm from South Africa. I just want to ask your panelists, and I really want to appreciate the input that was provided. How do we make sure that we don't leave anyone behind? Because women are not a homogeneous group. We've got women who are from the LGBTI community. We've got women with disability, women who work in informal settings, and so forth. So from your country-specific institutions, how do we make sure that we do not leave anyone behind? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. And the last question.
Hi.
Great.
Okay.
Yes.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Attain, and I'm so thankful for the panelists today sharing their knowledge and for Her Excellency for gracing us with her presence. My question is directed to Christine. I'm so grateful that you really pointed out to the challenges of not concentrating on just numerical values to advance the gains in health interventions. But my question to you is, since health data and achieving SDGs are really based on numbers, how can we change the narrative, considering that funding and resource allocation are heavily influenced by measurable results? How can we better represent and give power to the impact beyond numbers of these gender-responsive programs?
Great, thank you so much. Christine, can I allow you to answer that second question first? And then I'm going to allow Katie to answer the first question. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I thought I had 2 minutes to gather my thoughts. I think it's really important, especially, as you say, in a world, and in a world where a lot of progress, and I think in Rwanda, today I was in a health clinic, and it's amazing how everybody here has their data on their hands. We have this percentage of this, we are the clinic with this kind of achievement, which is really good to hear, because this is what should inform our interventions, is data. And it's amazing to see a country where that data sits on the fingertips of people in facilities, which is not always a given. But I think your question is a good one, that often data masks, it doesn't tell the whole story. And I think one of the things we're doing quite proactively at the moment at UNAIDS is to really push to look at sub-data and keep on pushing to actually find out what sits underneath it. Often when you look at data for a district or for a country, it tells one story. Then you start looking more in detail, and you realize there's people who are missing out, people who are not counted, people whose stories we're not hearing. So that's one, really disaggregate the data. And that speaks partly also to Steve's question, this disaggregation of data and really looking at where the inequalities, where the gaps are. And that's effort from all of us, and it's consciousness from all of us to not think that we're dealing with, when we say community, it's just one community. We know communities are multifaceted and people are multifaceted. That's one thing. But I also think your question is, how do we integrate stories and real life experiences? We keep on talking about people-centered approaches, people-centered services. But very rarely do we actually listen to people what their experience of those services is, what their experience of our programming is. And I don't have the entire answer to this, but I think you're pointing at something that sits very high on all of our agendas, to really think about what does a service, a program, an idea look like when people are experience it at service level or at country level.
Great, thank you so much, Christine. And for Steve's question, how do we make sure we leave no one behind?
You know, actually, I'm not even sure I need to answer, because I think that Christine did really a good job, you know, already responding to Stephen. But I think, Stephen, for us, the answer lies with you. I'll start with that. And as we work with you, I think that what we want to push for is getting more evidence. That's one, to actually understand the various needs, the different needs from the various groups of women. You're right, it's not a homogeneous group. The second thing I would say is, from that, from the evidence that you have, then you can inform programming, you can inform planning, you can inform implementation, but you can also course correct. Because where you have missed out from the beginning, along implementation, you need to think through course correction so that you don't leave anyone behind. I also want to say that, you know, as we are developing strategies, and sometimes we really think we know it, and we were challenged actually the last 2 days by the youth saying, you know, yes, you've been young people, but the world has really evolved. You tend to think that you know what we need. Engage us, actually, to be able to tailor the strategies to the needs. And I think we need to do much more of that, and be much more on the listening to hear rather than the listening to respond. And last but not least, I think one element for me that I'm always puzzled of, not in Rwanda again, I think this has been really a laboratory for me, but the documentation of experiences. Man, we have a wealth of experiences in our countries. We have a wealth of stories. We have a wealth of successful interventions. We also have actually interventions where we are lagging, that haven't worked, and that should actually inform how we improve. We need to document that so that then we get to a place where the programs that are being implemented are comprehensive enough, holistic enough, but really tailored to people's need and women's need.
I can give you, thank you so much. I can definitely give you 30 seconds.
Thanks so much. I just want to add on to what my colleague here has mentioned to answer that question. There is no intervention calling itself gender transformative that does not consider intersectionality and the diversity of women and girls. If we are saying we are doing gender transformative work and we are not considering that, we are not truly gender transformative. And therefore, we rely on yourselves to hold us to account, just like you're doing now. Ask us the hard questions, and we must respond if we are calling ourselves gender transformative. We must find ways of systematizing the action, gender transformative action that looks really deeply at intersectionality. If we are not, then we are not truly gender transformative. Thank you.
Thank you so much. May we please give our panel a round of applause. And yeah, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your contribution, and you may take your seats. Thank you so much. Last but certainly not least on our program, we'd love to introduce you now to the Leave No One Behind campaign short film, where advocates from GFAN Africa talk about what leaving no one behind means for them.
Leave Leaving no one behind means women in all of our diversity having equal access to health services for HIV, TB, and malaria.
No children in Africa or any other part of the world have to die from diseases that can be prevented, treated, and even eliminated.
Leaving no one behind means no more preventable deaths of pregnant mothers and children under the age of 5 from malaria.
No pregnant woman or child dies from a mosquito bite.
That every child, regardless of which part of the world they come from, will be prevented from acquiring HIV.
Empowering young women and girls to lead the fight against HIV.
Reaching out to all adolescent girls and young women in our diversity.
Ensuring that we address the issue of stigma and discrimination.
Every young person has the right to be protected and the right to access sexual reproductive health rights, services, and information regardless of their race, background, ethnicity, and sexual orientation.
Remembering that we're all human beings together.
Leaving no one behind means everyone has a seat at the table.
Government, civil society, communities, private sectors.
In all health decision-making processes.
Leaving no one behind means exactly that. Leaving no one behind.
Leave no one behind.
No one leave. Thank you so much. That brings us to the end of our program for tonight. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for being a part of us this evening. I do want to call 2 photo opportunities, though, for those who have participated tonight and some people that we'd love to remember on our pictures. And so first up, I'd like to call upon Honorable Dr. Sabine to please come to the front. And I'd like to call upon Her Excellency, the First Lady, please come on to the front. And I'd like to also call upon from the Global Fund, Marike Winrocks. I hope I said that correctly. I'd like to call upon Nuliet from the Rwanda NGO Forum. I'd love to call upon Maximina from Her Voice Fund. And I'd like to call upon Miss Linda Mafu from the Global Fund. Go ahead, 2. Thank you very much. Can I please ask the First Lady to remain on stage, as well as the Honorable Minister? Just the 2 to remain on stage, and yes, you may be excused, thank you. And then I'd like to call back our panelists, as well as Brice from the Global Fund. All right, thank you so much, everyone. Please take note that there is refreshments outside for all of us to enjoy. There are refreshments outside, so please do join us for those.